Hi everyone, Susan Brady here from Nurtured Bones. So, have you ever been told to stop drinking coffee because it's bad for your bones? That's probably one of the most common questions I get from women with osteoporosis. Well, a brand new review was just published in the journal Nutrients, looking at how caffeine affects the skeletal system. And the findings are actually pretty reassuring. So, the review looked at dozens of experimental studies examining how caffeine affects the skeletal system. Now, before we jump into the findings, there is one thing to know. Most of these studies included in this review were done in animals or in the laboratory, not in people. So even though they help us understand how caffeine may affect bone cells, they don't necessarily reflect what happens when a person enjoys a cup or two of coffee or tea a day. So, my biggest takeaway from this review is that dose matters. The researchers found that low to moderate amounts of caffeine had little effect on bone health, and in some studies, even appeared to have a beneficial effect. But when the doses became very high, caffeine reduced bone formation and interfered with normal bone remodeling. That's an important distinction because many headlines simply just say caffeine is bad for the bones, when the science is actually much more nuanced. Now, another thing I appreciated about this review is that it highlights something many people don't realize, and that is coffee isn't just caffeine. Coffee is actually a very complex beverage. Besides caffeine, it also contains hundreds of naturally occurring compounds, including polyphenols and antioxidants that may have beneficial effects on our health. So, when researchers study caffeine alone, that isn't exactly the same thing as drinking coffee. Now, when we look at studies involving people, the picture becomes even more reassuring. Most large human studies have found that moderate coffee consumption has little to no effect on bone density or fracture risk, especially if you're getting enough calcium and protein and participating in regular resistance exercises. So, in other words, for most people, 1 or 2 cups of coffee a day, it probably isn't the reason they're losing bone. And this is where I think sometimes we lose sight of the bigger picture. People often worry about one food or one thing. Should I stop coffee? Should I eat spinach? Should I avoid oxalates? But bone health doesn't depend on one food or one thing. It depends on everything working together. It depends on your digestion and nutrient absorption, your protein intake, strength training, your hormones, inflammation, your gut microbiome, sleep, stress. All of these things work together to influence bone health. So the question is, should you stop drinking coffee? For most people, probably not. Based on the research we have today, moderate caffeine intake is unlikely to have a meaningful impact on bone health. It's the very high levels of caffeine, especially when combined with poor nutrition or inadequate calcium and protein intake, that appear to be the most concerning. So, if you're someone who enjoys a morning cup of coffee or a few cups of tea, this review should be very reassuring. Rather than worrying about whether your morning coffee or tea is harming your bones, focus on habits that have the greatest impact. Eat a balanced diet, strength train regularly, support your gut health, and take care of your overall health. Bone health is much more than one food or one drink. And if you'd like to learn about the 5 pillars I believe have the biggest impact on your bone health, I've created a free Bones Method guide. It goes through my 5 pillars of bone health and also includes a simple self-assessment to help you identify which areas deserve your attention first. You can find the link in the description below. And I've also included a link to the new study on caffeine and skeletal health in the description. So if you'd like to read that for yourself, it's there. Thank you and have a great rest of your day.